what I'd like to do now is, I want to really kind of change gears and to kick things off with a really interesting outside perspective. So, I'm thrilled to be able to introduce Josh Prigge. He's the founder and CEO of Sustridge Sustainability Consulting. I've been fortunate enough to know Josh for a few years now, and what he's doing is really cool. He's working with businesses of all sizes, from the 3-person startups to Fortune 500 companies on sustainability planning and, really helping businesses think about the future and what they're doing with environmental sustainability. He also, just a few years ago, started something called the Sustainable Nation podcast, and he's interviewing sustainability leaders from companies and organizations all over the globe. And, just lots of really interesting insights and things for both people in our shoes as well as business owners to take away just some different insights and ideas and thoughts that they can apply to their own businesses and their own operations. So it's a really interesting podcast. About a year or two ago, we added the podcast to our website, and we announced new additions to the podcast in our e-newsletter. So, that's something that I encourage all of you to consider doing on your websites, or if you have newsletters, thinking about doing that. I'll make sure we share in the chat a link to the podcast and to Josh's organization, Sustridge Sustainability Consulting. So with that, Josh, welcome. Thanks for getting up so early to be with us. For those who don't know, Josh is in Hawaii, so he's got a big time zone difference. So with that, just want to welcome you and have you go ahead, Josh.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Chris. Really, really great to be here speaking with everybody. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to share my screen here. If that works for you, Chris. Let me
go ahead.
Okay. Is that main screen showing up with a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, thanks everybody. As Chris mentioned, I'm a sustainability professional. Been doing this for about 12 years now. Started out in higher education, managing sustainability for a university out in Hawaii Pacific University. Then I moved to the corporate world. After about 4 years of that, worked for a large wine company called Fetzer in Northern California as their director of sustainability. And then just had gotten to the point where really had, a number of different skills that I knew a lot of companies were going to be looking for. So I started a consulting business in 2017 and been working with all sorts of companies in all industries, really with all things sustainability. And I just wanted to talk today about, as a sustainability professional, historically, one of the big things that we all needed to do is learn how to communicate the business value of sustainability. I think now, nowadays sustainability really is becoming mainstream. But before that, we really had to influence, we had to communicate not just why this is good for the environment and the right thing to do, but why it's good for business. And so that's just kind of the message I wanted to communicate today, starting out with just what's happening in the world of sustainability, kind of what got us to the point we are today, what a lot of these companies are doing, and what that means for small businesses, and how it can really drive value for your business. So I'll start out just with kind of what brought us to where we are today, the evolution of corporate responsibility. And it started, kind of in the 80s with corporate philanthropy. So companies were, creating foundations, or they were donating and doing good works projects in the communities that they operated in. A lot of it was kind of reactive to, bad publicity that corporations were getting in the 70s and things like that. In the 90s, this turned into, these good works projects and the good work they were doing externally, they kind of brought within the own walls of their company. This is when the term triple bottom line became well known. it turned into corporate social responsibility. So companies were focusing kind of on starting to do good in their company within their own companies. In the 2000s, this started to turn into corporate sustainability. So companies were realizing they could actually create kind of a competitive advantage with a focus on, environmental leadership and reducing waste, reducing energy, and this is when companies started hiring, full-time employees to manage things like sustainability and CSR. What's really interesting now, we won't really get into today, but some companies are actually moving beyond corporate sustainability towards regenerative development. So they're looking at not just how can we, reduce our impacts and be less bad as a company, but how can we actually completely eliminate these impacts and be overall good and a net positive impact on society and on the environment. So companies are looking at things like net positive and producing more renewable energy than they use, sequestering more carbon than they emit, things like water neutral or even water positive, where they're sending more water into the water tables than they're pulling out. So some really exciting things from some of those leaders. But just looking at the landscape, a lot of really exciting things happening. Big companies around the world creating a lot of big goals. We have what's called the RE100, which is a collaborative of over 300 companies that are committing to 100% renewable energy. Very big companies like Starbucks and Apple and Nike and the biggest companies in the world. But beyond renewable energy, these companies are really creating some really ambitious goals focused on sustainability. And it's important to realize these are all voluntary. These things aren't required yet in the United States. Even things like reporting and reducing your greenhouse gas emissions. This is kind of a typical thing that most big companies are doing nowadays, but it's still essentially voluntary, putting out sustainability reports. But companies like Walmart, they have a goal to reduce a gigaton of greenhouse gas emissions in their global supply chain. Target has a commitment to reduce 30% of their emissions in their supply chain by 2030. Microsoft has a goal to become actually carbon negative and actually reduce more carbon than they emit as a company. Starbucks has a goal to reduce carbon emissions by 50%. So you look at these big goals, these big companies, and a lot of this is going to be in their supply chain that they have to address. So it's the other companies that are supplying to these companies that are also going to be, if you want to look good in the eyes of some of these large companies, it kind of has a trickle-down effect. So we now have what's called the Science-Based Targets Initiative, where these companies are aligning their greenhouse gas reduction goals with what the science says is needed to avoid a 1.5 degree temperature rise. So really aligning their targets with the Paris Climate Accord. And again, the only way they're going to achieve that is by getting everyone on board, all of their stakeholders, not just their operations, but their supply chain and the organizations that are part of their value chain. And then just a couple weeks ago, the SEC came out with a proposal that's going to, if approved, require all publicly traded companies to report their greenhouse gas emissions and their climate change risks and opportunities, which would be just another game changer in the amazing progress we've seen, in corporate sustainability over the past few years. Again, all publicly traded companies, but that's going to include their supply chain. If they're going to make true reductions in their emissions, they're going to have to reduce from their suppliers and again, have a trickle-down effect to a lot of different companies. The B Corp movement is something that's really exciting. I just saw today there's now 5,000 B Corps, certified B Corps in the world. So this is a growing rapidly. This is a certification for companies, really represents the highest standards for social and environmental responsibilities. So it's kind of a new type of business. It's kind of a hybrid between a nonprofit and a for-profit. So it's a for-profit business, but it has, some sort of purpose to provide a positive social or environmental impact kind of at its core. So to become certified, you go through a rigorous process, over 200 and some questions that looks at really every aspect of your business and then gives you a score. And I'll tell you, when I was at Fetzer, this is a company that, we became the first zero waste certified wine company in the world. We were carbon neutral, operating on 100% renewable energy since the 90s. Been growing 100% of their grapes organic certified since the 80s. And when we went through the B Corp certification process, you need a score of 80. We scored at 80.5. So it just shows you how high those standards are for a company that had been leading in sustainability for a long time. To get that score was really showed us, that this certification means something. And so when people see these companies with the B Corp certified logo, we know that that sustainability program is authentic and it's meeting really the highest standards for social and environmental responsibility. And then beyond, B Corp certified, we have benefit corporations, which is the actual incorporation of a business. It's, like it just operates just like an S Corp or a C Corp, but it has some sort of purpose, some sort of public benefit in the world. So operates just like a normal company, although you're required to report on those public benefits every year. So, looking at this momentum that we're seeing in the sustainability world, it's, I think, very clear that, sustainability is not a fad. It's no longer a niche or, a nice to have. It's becoming more and more clear that a company's bottom line and growth potential is starting to depend on sustainability and their commitment to not just maximizing profit at all costs, but doing it the right way and, having some values and some purpose. So now I'm just going to kind of talk about why sustainability is seeing this growth and really driving value for companies. Starting with consumer demand. So I think, the research just keeps coming out. It tells us that more and more consumers want to purchase sustainable products and purchase from and support companies that share their values and share their beliefs. Millennials, Gen Z, Gen X are really leading the charge in this, but actually the research shows that their older counterparts actually aren't that far behind. Through Nielsen reports show that 81% of people extremely or very important that companies implement programs to improve the environment, and 73% definitely or probably change their consumption habits to reduce their impact on the environment. U.S. consumers spent around $150 billion on sustainable products, which has jumped up 20 to 30% since 2014. So the growth in sustainable products, the research shows that more and more consumers are interested in kind of aligning their purchasing choices with their values. And then in investor demand as well, we've seen an incredible rise in ESG investing over the past 12 to 14 months. ESG is environment, social, and governance, kind of some new terminology really that kind of encompasses sustainability. But it's telling us that investors really believe sustainability is important and material aspect of the companies they invest in. So just, the largest investor in the world, really BlackRock, they manage over $7 trillion in assets. Their CEO, comes out with a letter to CEOs every year. And every year he's talking about sustainability, the importance of climate action, and how this is, going to be critical and just a key part for investors moving forward. And we see that here in the rise in ESG investing, which has just skyrocketed over the past few years, as well as, performance of ESG companies. So companies that, have a robust ESG program and disclosure really have always performed well, not just recently when you look at the performance over the years. So, it's clear that the investment community understands that sustainability creates business value. But how exactly does it? How does sustainability create that value? So we'll break that down here a little bit and look at some of the real proven benefits of sustainability. And starting with employees. So, just like consumers are looking to purchase from companies that are doing good things in the world, that, share their values and beliefs, people are looking to work for those companies as well. Millennials are going to comprise about 75% of the global workforce by 2025. A lot of these folks have a desire to, do more meaningful work and work for companies that are not just about maximizing profits. They're providing some sort of benefit and some sort of value to the world, to society, or to the environment. A lot of employees really are questioning the meaning of their work. We're obviously seeing the Great Resignation, and I think that plays a part in it. People want to, align the work that they do with some sort of purpose. So, on top of, recruiting employees, I think retention and engagement. So when you're actively involving employees in sustainability initiatives, and it provides them with more purpose and more meaning in their work, and really leads to more engagement and higher productivity. So there's an organization, the National Environmental Education Foundation, which has conducted a number of studies on the impacts of sustainability and employee engagement. So they partnered with PricewaterhouseCoopers on these studies, and their studies find that there's a positive relationship between sustainability engagement and employee engagement, and that sustainability engagement positively impacts nearly all dimensions of traditional employee engagement, from alignment with the company, pride in the company, discretionary effort that these employees provide, as well as advocating for their company. Another way it's, driving value is mitigating risk. So, the risk facing businesses, we talk about climate change, and, obviously there's physical risks of climate change and being prepared for that, but also regulatory risk that a business faces from new government policy dealing with climate change, or different states like California that are implementing new regulations to reduce emissions across the state, reduce waste in the landfills. But there's also the PR risks that a company faces. So, obviously we're living in a world of rapid transparency where information is spread across the world in an instant. So mitigating risk against potential, reputational risk is important. So when we look at physical risks, regulatory risks, reputational risk, having a true program around sustainability that's authentic, that is not, seen as greenwashing, it can really help go a long ways in reducing that risk. I think one of the most straightforward ones is reducing costs. So obviously when we're reducing waste, we're becoming more efficient. We're eliminating wasteful practices. So whether that's reducing solid waste, reducing energy waste, or water waste, or reducing greenhouse gas emissions, all of these build a more efficient business. And, all these practices save money. So, some of them obviously have a quicker payback. Energy efficiency traditionally probably has the fastest payback. If you have energy efficiency opportunities, it's really great to look at those, because you can a lot of times get a payback in less than a year or even a couple years. And I think most CFOs and finance folks would be very happy with that. And, maybe some of these initiatives have a little bit longer payback, like if you're investing in waste, so solid waste reduction, or especially water. Water is pretty cheap, so it doesn't have the quick payback. But one thing I always say is how can we bundle these programs together? Package them together, where an energy efficiency and a water efficiency project together might have, average out to a decent payback that would be accepted by the finance team, or even creating a revolving loan fund where you invest in energy efficiency, and then all those savings that you realize, you reinvest those savings for waste or for water or those other programs that might not have great paybacks. But I love a quote from William McDonough, who wrote Cradle to Cradle. Was really known as kind of the godfather of the circular economy. But he says there is no waste in nature. And so, everything in nature has a purpose, everything has value. waste is really the result of design flaw. So we need to, rethink and redesign the way that we develop our products, the way that we operate our facilities, the way that we run our businesses, and the way that we operate as a society. Another business value is innovation, driving innovation. So sustainability as a lens can lead to innovative ideas. When you use sustainability to look at your business in all aspects of your business, it can lead to changes in business processes, or developing new products or services that people might be looking for, using or creating new technologies, or different ways to manage change management techniques. There's a Deloitte report called Sustainability Driven Innovation, and they look at a few hundred studies where they kind of categorize companies as innovation leaders and sustainability leaders. They create some methodology to categorize these companies, and they look at what they find is that when companies that pursue sustainability significantly increase their chance of becoming also an innovative leader in the process. And when they looked at across multiple lists, sustainability leaders were more than 400% more likely to also be considered innovation leaders in the criteria that they developed. So what does it all lead to? Increased consumer demand for sustainable products, increased employee engagement, employee retention, reduce risk, reduce operating costs, driving innovation, attracting and retaining young talent. It really leads to increased value in higher performing companies. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that keeps coming out that suggests sustainable companies outperform others. Nielsen in the past couple of years, sales of consumer goods from brands with demonstrated commitments to sustainability have grown more than 4% globally, while the others grew 1%. Research from the UK showed that certified B Corps in the UK were growing 28 times faster than the national economic growth of 0.5%. Unilever's sustainable brands are growing 50% faster than the rest of their business. And a Harvard Business Review shows, sustainable companies deliver significant positive financial performance. A study of a literature review of over 200 studies on sustainability and corporate performance showed that 90% of those 200 studies concluded that good ESG standards lower the cost of capital. 88% showed that good ESG practices result in better operational performance, and 80% of those 200 studies show that stock price performance is positively correlated with good sustainability practices. So this stuff continues to come out, and I think for the reasons I mentioned, it's starting to become clear to a lot of people. And this is just an overview of kind of the journey. So on the left, if you're starting from the left end of the spectrum to the right, so if you're just getting started on sustainability, it's about compliance, being compliant, making sure you're meeting the regulations and things like that. As you move to the right in your kind of sustainability program, as it evolves, you start to realize cost savings, you reduce your operating costs, and then you have an enhanced workforce, you're recruiting and retaining talent. Then there's actually revenue opportunities from new products or new ways of doing business, PR and marketing opportunities. And then on the far end of the spectrum, those really leaders in sustainability are starting to realize actual business model innovation. And go ahead.
Just real quick, just so you know, a couple minutes if you want to leave some time for Q&A.
You bet. This is, I think, my last slide. So really just a getting started. So if you're just getting started in your program, Materiality Assessment, understanding what are the most important sustainability related issues facing your business and your industry that you should be addressing. Baselining your performance. Of course, you can't manage what you don't measure. So starting to measure metrics along those material issues, and then setting goals and targets, engaging employees in the program, monitoring and reporting your progress, and then continual improvement. How are we going to continue to make progress? You can look at certification programs like B Corp and others as kind of frameworks for continual improvement. So that's all I have, and hopefully I didn't go too long over time. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to take any of those.
Yeah, you're not over at all. Perfect timing, Josh. Thank you. And I guess real quick, if I'll throw out a question to get things started. Just when it's a small business, where do you think beyond compliance, which should be the very first thing that a small business looks at? Because that slide you had just a couple of slides ago, getting started, the legal is really, and the regulatory compliance is what a lot of our programs do, is help people get started there. What's a good entry point for going beyond that, do you think?
Yeah, I would say, the first step here is materiality assessment. And that's really just a formal process you go through to understand what are the most important issues. So once you're, doing compliance and you've kind of done the bare minimum, let's understand what are the most important issues. Where does your company or your industry have the biggest social and environmental impacts? And that's going to kind of help you understand where to prioritize your efforts. So materiality assessment really includes stakeholder engagement. So talking to employees, talking to external stakeholders like customers and suppliers, strategic partners, whoever it might be, to understand what are the issues that are important to them and important to the business for the long-term health and sustainability of the company. So understanding those issues, identifying them, prioritizing them, and then kind of going down this list of getting metrics on, okay, we have our issues. How are we going to understand how well we're doing with these issues? Let's start tracking our metrics and then setting goals and reduction targets and commitments, and then engaging our employees around these efforts and reporting on our progress.
Awesome, thank you. And Nancy, are there other questions for Josh?
Yes, Josh, thank you so much. Great presentation. We have a question from Andrew. He says, he asks, what are among some of the optimal things governments can do to encourage firms to move towards greater sustainability?
Governments, yeah, I guess, when I was out in Hawaii, the state had a great green business program. And so when I was managing sustainability at Hawaii Pacific University, we enrolled in that. We get a green business award, met the governor, got some nice recognition. I think programs like that where you can recognize leaders and, but not just, give them some badge. How can we communicate to the rest of the businesses out there why this is good for business? So, programs where you can recognize leaders, but also communicate how this has helped their business. How is this driving value? Maybe increasing their profits or, helping them attract employees. I think programs are like that where we're recognizing, providing resources on how companies can move sustainability forward, but then also some sort of education campaign or communication on why this is actually good for business. Because I think for a lot of companies to move that needle for them, that's what's important to them, is why it's good for business.
Excellent, thank you. We have another question from Paula. She asks, can you speak a bit more to how we can ensure that we avoid greenwashing, especially for large corporations, which usually have a focus on shareholder financial performance?
Yeah, I think transparency is the most important. So being transparent about, why you are focusing on the certain issues that you are. And I think if you're able to communicate that you've gone through a materiality assessment like this, then that is kind of, best practices for that. But transparency in your performance. Are you putting out sustainability reports or putting out information on your website about how you're actually doing with these issues. And then I think the ultimate way to avoid greenwashing is like B Corp, really rigorous third-party certifications like that can help with that as well, because you're right. I think a lot of consumers out there, employees, people are very aware of greenwashing and are kind of always questioning the motive behind some sort of marketing or communication from a company. So when we can be transparent on our progress, even on those issues where we're not doing the best, that's what I think people want to see. And they want to see, not just the good stuff. It's okay to show some of these bad things where you maybe need to improve, but if you have goals and targets and you're demonstrating that you're working towards them, you might not be there yet, but you're being transparent about your progress. I think that's one of the key ways to really avoid, greenwashing claims.
Okay,
right.
thank you. Go ahead, Chris. I think we're out of time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we're out of time, but I want to thank you, Josh. And I put a link in the chat to the Sustainable Nation podcast that you have. So thank you, for sharing that with us. And, thanks for your thoughts today. I mean, your one slide talking about just sort of the evolution of, sustainability. It's something that, early on, I was just mentioning how these programs were all started back with the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments. And, so celebrating 30 years of existence, and we've seen a lot of changes, and it was really great to sort of see how you encapsulated that with how it's affecting businesses and how businesses have responded over the years. So thank you.
That's great. Well, yeah, thank you so much for the invite. Everyone, thanks for the great questions. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks, Josh.